Wonderful. Well, it's my deep privilege to introduce my brother, Bhai Amrik Johal, a UCLA PhD candidate in higher education and organizational change. Amrit works as Assistant Dean of Students at Irvine Valley College, South Orange County Community College District. Amrit also identifies as Punjabi Sikh, a first-generation college student and immigrant. His paternal and maternal sides of the family immigrated from Punjab to the Fiji Islands and England, respectively. His research focuses on bringing forth the Sikh experience within higher education research and practice, uh, often an invisible area within what it even means to be Desi South Asian. So without further ado, I'm going to spotlight uh, Amrik Johal, and he will speak on the influence of family on the educational trajectories of Sikh college students. So over to Amrik.
Thanks so much, Dirk, for the intro. And thanks, Dirk and Elaine, for all the organization and support throughout. And shout out to my fellow presenters. I've learned a lot from everything you've shared today. So thank you. My name's Amrik Johal. I'm a PhD candidate at UCLA, and my research focuses on the influence of family on the educational trajectories of Sikh college students. This was a really pertinent thing I wanted to include today before even getting started. So this past weekend, there was an attack on an elder in the Sikh community in New York, and this has become far too commonplace for the Sikh community after 9/11. So I wanted to call attention to this because this is what really grounds a lot of our work as Sikh scholars, is the fact that our community is racialized, misunderstood, and is often the target of hate crimes. And just to add some more background here, Nirmal Singh was attacked on the way to the Gurdwara, which is the Sikh temple, and he was attacked unprovoked, and it took hours and hours and hours for any police action. And Mr. Singh himself was apprehensive because of his immigration status. And so there are so many different layers involved, including issues like language. So I put this on here and dated it because this is happening far too often, and it continues to rattle our community and grounds the research that I'm doing due to that racialization and invisibility. And as we know, like fellow Desi and South Asian practitioners, racialization makes it really hard to report hate incidences and hate bias. And now transitioning into my presentation, at my institution of study at UCLA and institution of work, which is in South Orange County, the land I inhabit is physically situated in the original ancestral homelands of the Kij, Chumash, and Tongva tribes. We pay respect to the Kij, Chumash, and Tongva peoples, past, present, and future, and their continuing presence in the homeland and throughout their historical diaspora. And I wanted to shout out UCLA's American Indian Student Association, who continues to do a lot of great work at UCLA and does phenomenal programming in the month of October for Indigenous Peoples Month. And I just wanted to shout them out for all the labor that they put in into creating space for Indigenous voices in the University of California. So the problem my research has sought to investigate is grounded in the model minority myth and the fact that the Sikh community gets lost in the lack of data disaggregation as an Asian American subgroup, which all of us are much too familiar with. And furthermore, any race neutral conversations tend to further unacknowledge minoritized Asian American subgroups. And lastly, following 9/11, and again after the election of Donald Trump, anti-Sikh violence has spiked in the United States due to rampant Islamophobia and xenophobia that harms our community. So Sikhs in the United States. So at the top, in case you don't know, the Sikhs are an ethno-religious group. So I highlight some of our core beliefs as a community and want to call out important points here that the Punjabi Sikh community has been in the US for over 125 years and are among the first Asian immigrants to enter the United States in the late 1800s. And the estimation is that there's over 500 Sikh Americans across the nation. And we all come from the Punjab region of South Asia. And this is right on the border of present-day India and Pakistan. And Punjab was split due to British colonialism. And what you'll see throughout Sikh history is that there's generations of hardship and racism. And as a result, our community has remained really tight-knit and stuck to its ethno-religious identity, and really exemplifies strength and perseverance, which connect back to our core beliefs of one God, selfless service, and always living truthfully. So my research questions are, how does family influence the educational trajectories of Sikh American college students? What resources, networks, and cultural assets influence their education, aspirations, and trajectories? And what support and messaging do they get from their families? Theoretically, there's three large frameworks that I've fused together for my data analysis, and they are funds of knowledge, because I want to look at how household messages are transmitted within the ethno-religious community. So within a Sikh household, what messages are passed down and what funds of knowledge do students attain? The second is Bourdieuian theory, to look at how social inequality reproduces itself depending on social class. And SES pops up a lot in my findings, which I'll cover. And then everything is grounded in critical race theory, because that allows me to look at ethnic identity and religious identity and the intersection. So I draw also on Kimberly Crenshaw's work to kind of nuance what ethno-religious identity means for Sikh college students today. Sorry, this is going slow, so it's skipping my slide. Sorry, one sec. The existing bodies of literature. So I can break it down into four broad sections. There's a healthy amount of literature on early Sikh immigration, and this focuses on early 20th century immigration to the US. There's some literature on Sikh community development in the 1980s, and then there's a new body of literature that focuses on Sikh anti-colonial movements. And my focus is on parental and familial involvement, because despite there being limited research on the Sikh community, like I couldn't cover everything from a dissertation, so I'm looking only at familial influence, but there's so many places we could start. And then going back, so this is my dissertation study. It's qualitative and I'm using narrative inquiry. I have interviewed 30 participants, and that's all I'm going to interview for my dissertation. And they represent 8 colleges and universities across California. And for data analysis, I use thematic analysis to look at patterns between data sets, especially when participants are calling out family and like collegiate expectations. You're not meant to be able to look at every line, but I just wanted to show you that there's many first generation college students in my study, and a lot of STEM majors, a variety of years in school, and then I have a handful of transfer students that represent different community colleges and universities in California. And then the key factors, sorry, it skipped again. Okay, so the key findings. So from my study, there were a couple of really salient points that emerged from the interview transcripts. Clearly for participants, their family sacrifices in immigrating to the United States drove their educational pursuits. So many participants shared that due to their parents' and grandparents' sacrifices to leave their home country and come to the United States in search of better opportunities for their kids, that's what was the catalyst for them to want to pursue higher education. So it's kind of built into their family's emigration narrative from Punjab to the US. And if we dive deeper, Sikh immigration from Punjab is tied to socio-political events and anti-Sikh bias and violence. So during those peaks, there was a huge exit of Sikhs to North America. So that matches participants' parents' immigration to the United States. The second is college expectations. So often when we talk about Asian American college expectations, there's stereotypes that are out there, especially with the different publications that reference like Tiger Mom and Tiger Parenting, but it's much more complicated because that doesn't look at social and cultural factors that influence college expectations. So participants in this study felt the expectation to go to college as their parents were wanting greater social mobility for generations to come. So college expectations were embedded into their upbringing. Emotional support was a really significant finding because it's really tied to Sikhi, which is Sikhism. So participants would share that their parents would provide emotional support by quoting different religious experts from excerpts from Sikhism. And lastly, informal versus formal support. This matches other literature on Latinx family influence on college trajectory. For second gen students, they're getting much more formal support with college applications and college tours. However, the first gen students in the study are getting a lot of informal support, which is like more moral support and encouragement. So that was another interesting dichotomy because gen status matters. And then if we add a critical analysis here, which is really important, these were key factors that really added nuance and complexity. Gender, so specifically female and male students, heard different expectations of them from parents and grandparents, including supporting elders and like if they had a grandparent at home. Immigration status was also a factor as like the recency of immigration and if the student was born in the United States also is a factor. I mentioned socioeconomic status and also generation status. There's many implications, but I think visibility is the biggest one in ensuring that there is a Punjabi Sikh present on college campuses and more visibility for students to get supportive services, knowing their intersecting religious and ethnic identities. So the prompt that we were to answer today is what kind of ancestor do you want to be? That was really hard because I never thought about myself as one day being an ancestor, but I wanted to first call out that Leah Lakshmi, she wrote this to kind of speak and highlight the queer community's experience. So as a heterosexual male, like I just want to call out that that's what the poem was about, but I'm doing this because it's part of the activity, but just wanted to honor what they were doing in their poem. These are my grandparents. So in the middle, you can see my maternal grandfather and grandma getting their Canadian citizenship after many, many, many years. On the bottom in the middle are my paternal and maternal grandmothers. Far left is my maternal grandma. She was building her home in Punjab after going back. So she was building and like making sure there was a legacy. And on the far right is my paternal grandfather, who was delivering a political speech in the Fiji Islands in the 1980s. So my grandparents have always been incredibly strong, and they're my ancestors. And if I could be just a fraction of what they are and what they represent, I'll consider life like successful because they've endured immense hardship and really sacrificed a lot for us to even be in North America. And then I end with this last photo. So this is the Harmandir Sahib in Punjab. This is the holiest Punjabi Sikh shrine. And I just wanted to call your attention as this is like our epicenter of ethno-religious identity. And it's a picture I took 2 years ago when I was in Punjab. And it really speaks to the service of the Sikh community and our like this centricity of who we are in every single thing we do. So I just wanted to share it with this group as well. So thank you so much for your time. And thanks again, everyone, for organizing this space.
Thanks so much, Amrik, for that presentation. So much there. It resonates when it comes to community being so at the heart of the Sikh experience. Um, there's so many resonances that come across so many APIDA cultures that sit alongside that and can value that. I'm wondering whether we have time for a question for Amrik from our audience, and I would love to be able to invite you to either put your question in the chat for Amrik or to unmute yourselves and come forward and to ask that question about what resonated with you. Yes, so I invite you to do so. Elaine Jessica.
Hi, Amrik. My question for you is, where did you find support to pursue the dissertation on a group that you know, like you said, visibility is such an issue, like on campus, away from campus, other groups? Where did you find support during this process?
As you know, Elaine, like the PhD dissertation process is very like individual and lonely. Like it's very isolating, and Dr. Roderick's like you just finished too, like it's just really isolating at times. So I think really relying on my committee helped, because my committee, they do this work to amplify invisible voices and our leaders in CRT. And CRT is to extract why there's invisibility. So having them really helped. My advisors, Pat McDonough, my committees, Rob Tiranishi, Cecilia Rios Aguilar, and Danny Solorzano. So they really pushed me to like keep going, and they do this work. So it wasn't surprising for them. They were like, well, yeah, just do it. So they were really helpful. And I tried not to share too much with my family, because if we shared how much stress the PhD journey has, like our families would probably freak out. So I just kind of rely on my committee a lot, and they helped me a lot. Yeah. Thanks for
That's a that's a power committee right there, or with those three. So, um, and yes, like the PhD journey can be isolating, and the power of a supportive committee where you don't have to kind of translate this becomes so important. Translate the need for it, or why it's important to do this kind of research. Please join me in showing our appreciation to Amrik Johal, soon to be Dr. Johal. Wishing you so much joy as you continue to finalize your dissertation, and we'll be so ecstatic to welcome you into the pantheon of Desi doctors in higher education and student affairs administration. And with that, yes, make some noise. Make some noise. Yes.